December 11, 1944. Hürtgen Forest, Germany. Thick snow crunched under the weight of the M4A3E2 Sherman jumbo tank as it lumbered forward through the dense woods, its engine growling against the icy German air. Obersturmführer Klaus Weber adjusted his binoculars, a smile of confidence crossing his face as he spotted the approaching American armor. His crew had knocked out 17 Allied tanks in the past month alone with their deadly 88mm gun. This would be just another easy kill for the logbook. Little did he know that this particular encounter would shatter everything he believed about German technological superiority. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the tale of how the greatest anti-tank gun of World War II met its match in American industrial ingenuity, and how that confrontation changed the psychological landscape of the European theater, one dead certain German gunner at a time. The morning had begun like many others for Lieutenant Thomas Randall of the 761st Tank Battalion. The 24-year-old from Omaha, Nebraska, commander of the M4A3E2 jumbo nicknamed Blockbuster, had been briefed on the dangerous forest crossing ahead. Intelligence reports indicated at least 3 88mm guns positioned along their route to Bergstein. The legendary German 8.8cm Flak 36 anti-aircraft and anti-tank gun had earned a fearsome reputation among Allied tank crews. With a muzzle velocity of 840 meters per second and the ability to penetrate 108mm of armor at 1,000 meters, the 88 had become the stuff of nightmares. "Keep your eyes peeled, gentlemen," Randall instructed his crew through the intercom system as they prepared for the day's advance. "Intelligence says there are 88s in these woods. Stay alert. Those Krauts can punch through anything we've got," replied Sergeant Adam Collins, the gunner, tension evident in his voice. "Even these reinforced hulls." Randall tapped the thick steel wall of the turret. "That's what they think. Let's prove them wrong." What Randall knew, and what the Germans did not, was that his M4A3E2 jumbo was unlike the standard Sherman tanks the enemy had grown accustomed to destroying with ease. While the regular M4 Sherman had frontal hull armor of just 50.8mm, the jumbo boasted an impressive 101.6mm frontal hull plate with an additional 38.1mm armor applique welded on, bringing the total to a formidable 139.7mm, or roughly 5.5 inches, approaching 7 inches at its thickest points with overlapping plates. Developed specifically to lead breakout operations in the hedgerow country following D-Day, only 254 of these specialized assault tanks had been produced at the Fisher Tank Arsenal in Grand Blanc, Michigan. The jumbos had arrived in Europe with little fanfare, and German intelligence had failed to distinguish them from standard Shermans. Their outward silhouette remained similar, with only the trained eye noticing the more vertical front hull and thicker turret. This case of mistaken identity would prove catastrophic for German anti-tank crews who believed they faced the same vulnerable prey they had been hunting since Normandy. As Randall's column of 5 tanks moved through the snow-covered forest, Oberstfreiter Hans Müller peered through the optics of his 8.8cm Flak 36. A veteran of the Eastern Front before being transferred to the West, Müller had personally dispatched 23 Soviet tanks during Operation Citadel at Kursk. Now stationed in the frozen Hürtgen Forest, the 29-year-old from Dresden methodically tracked the lead American tank through his sights. "Sherman at 800 meters, he announced calmly to his gun crew, adjusting for elevation. "Just another day at the shooting gallery," replied Feldwebel Dieter Hoffmann, the gun commander, as he recorded the coordinates in his logbook. The German crew operated with the quiet efficiency that came from 2 years of combat experience. Through his binoculars, Hoffmann noted something slightly unusual about the approaching tank, but dismissed his concerns. The Americans were known for making field modifications to their vehicles. Perhaps this was just another example of their improvised engineering. "Target acquired," Müller reported, his finger poised over the firing mechanism. "Fire," ordered Hoffmann. The 88mm gun roared to life, its distinctive crack echoing through the forest as the high-velocity shell streaked toward Randall's jumbo. The 9.4 kilograms armor-piercing round, capable of penetrating 108 millimeters of armor at this distance, slammed directly into the center of the Sherman's frontal hull. Inside Blockbuster, the impact rocked the 42-ton vehicle, sending a deafening metallic clang reverberating through the confined space. Private First Class Michael Rodriguez, the bow gunner, instinctively ducked at the sound. "We're hit," he shouted over the intercom. Randall steadied himself in the commander's seat, eyes quickly scanning the instruments. "Damage report. Direct hit to the front plate, sir," reported Corporal James Wilson, the driver, his voice betraying surprise. "But we're still operational. All systems normal." At the German position, confusion spread across Muller's face as he watched through his optics. The Sherman should have erupted in flames, or at least halted from the impact. Instead, the American tank continued its advance, seemingly unfazed by the direct hit. "Armor-piercing round ineffective," he reported with disbelief. "Target still advancing." "Impossible," Hoffman hissed, grabbing the binoculars to verify. "Load another round. Aim for the same spot." As the German crew frantically prepared a second shot, Randall had already located the muzzle flash of the 88mm gun. "Target identified at 2 o'clock. Partial cover behind the fallen oak," he directed. "Collins, high explosive shell on my mark." "High explosive loaded," confirmed Collins, swinging the turret toward the German position. "Fire," ordered Randall. The Jumbo's 75mm gun recoiled as it sent a high explosive shell toward the German position. Though less powerful than the German 88, the American He round landed with devastating effect, exploding just meters from the anti-tank crew, showering them with dirt, snow, and shrapnel. Hoffman's ears rang from the explosion as he shouted orders to his stunned crew. "We need another shot. The shell must have been defective." Muller, his face now streaked with blood from a small shrapnel wound, reacquired the target and fired again. The second 88mm round hit just inches from the first impact point on the Jumbo's hull. Inside Blockbuster, the crew braced for the hit, but again, the reinforced frontal armor held. "Another hit, sir," reported Rodriguez. Still no penetration. A smile crossed Randall's face. "Collins, let's return the favor. Armor piercing this time." As the Jumbo's turret rotated slightly to adjust aim, the German crew loaded a third round with increasingly desperate movements. 3 more Jumbos had now emerged from the tree line, advancing in formation toward their position. "Muller, what is happening?" demanded Obersturmführer, who had arrived at the gun position after hearing the unexpected exchange of fire. "Sir, our rounds are hitting but not penetrating," Muller explained, his voice shaking with a mix of confusion and fear. "Something is wrong with that Sherman." Weber grabbed the binoculars and studied the approaching tank. His eyes widened as he noticed the subtle differences in the hull shape and thickness. "That's not a standard Sherman," he realized too late. The Jumbo fired again, this time its armor-piercing round finding the 88mm gun's shield. The German weapon was knocked off its mounting, its barrel twisted at an unnatural angle. 2 crew members lay motionless beside it. "Fall back," Weber ordered the survivors. "Radio headquarters that the Americans have a new heavy tank. Our 88s are ineffective against its frontal armor." As the Germans retreated from their position, Randall's column continued its advance. Word quickly spread among the American forces about the Jumbo's successful encounter with the dreaded 88mm gun. For crews who had lived in fear of the German weapon, the news was nothing short of revolutionary. Major General Maurice Rose, commander of the 3rd Armored Division, received the after-action report with great interest. "This changes our tactical approach," he told his staff officers. "If the Jumbos can withstand direct hits from 88s, they should lead all advances through areas with suspected anti-tank positions." Meanwhile, the news traveled equally fast through German ranks, but with the opposite effect. Field Marshal Walter Model demanded verification of the reports coming from the Hurtgen sector. "It's confirmed, sir," reported his intelligence officer, Hauptmann Fritz Keller. "We've received similar reports from 3 different sectors. The Americans have deployed a modified Sherman variant with substantially increased frontal armor. Our standard anti-tank procedures are proving ineffective against its frontal aspect." Model's face darkened. How many of these vehicles have they deployed? Intelligence estimates between 200 and 300, sir. And how many can we produce of our Tiger IIs in the same time frame? Model asked, already knowing the answer. Perhaps 20 to 25, given current production constraints, Keller replied quietly. The reality of American industrial capacity versus Germany's dwindling resources hung in the air between them. While Germany could produce technically superior vehicles in small numbers, the Americans could identify a battlefield need and respond with hundreds of effective purpose-built vehicles in a matter of months. 2 days later, on December 13, 1944, Oberstleutnant Otto Heidkamper of Army Group B's operations staff prepared a briefing document on the new American tank threat. The document, titled Tactical Response to Reinforced Sherman Variants, was distributed to anti-tank units across the Western Front. When engaging modified Sherman tanks with reinforced frontal armor, the document advised standard frontal engagement with 88 mm guns should be avoided. Target track assemblies, side armor, or turret rings instead. If possible, maneuver to engage from flanks where armor thickness remains comparable to standard models. For German tank crews and anti-tank gunners who had grown accustomed to their technical superiority, this admission of vulnerability came as a psychological blow. The Americans, previously derided for their allegedly inferior tank designs, had found a way to neutralize Germany's most effective anti-tank weapon. On December 15, 1944, Lieutenant Randall's Jumbo led another advance, this time toward the village of Kleinhau. Intelligence had warned of multiple 88 mm positions covering the approach. As Blockbuster rounded a bend in the road, two 88 mm rounds struck its frontal armor in rapid succession. Direct hits, no penetration, reported Rodriguez with considerably less anxiety than during their first encounter. They're learning, Randall observed. Those shots were aimed at exactly the same spot, trying to weaken the armor through repeated impacts. Collins traversed the turret, located the muzzle flash, and returned fire. The He round landed among the German position, followed by a secondary explosion as ammunition cooked off. Target neutralized, Collins confirmed. As the Jumbos continued their advance, they encountered increasingly less resistance from German anti-tank positions. In several instances, crews abandoned their guns before the American tanks came into effective range, a behavior previously unheard of on the Western Front. The psychological impact of the Jumbo's appearance extended beyond the front lines. On December 17, 1944, even as the Germans launched their massive Ardennes offensive, General Oberst Heinz Guderian raised the issue during a meeting with Hitler at the Führer headquarters. The Americans have deployed a new Sherman variant with armor thick enough to resist our 88 mm guns, he reported. Our anti-tank units are reporting decreasing effectiveness against American armored spearheads. Hitler dismissed the concern. Our new offensive will catch the Americans completely by surprise. Their tanks, modified or not, will be cut off and destroyed from the rear and flanks where their armor remains vulnerable. But on the ground, the reality was changing the fundamental dynamics of tank warfare on the Western Front. Captain William Morrison of the 745th Tank Battalion witnessed this change firsthand during operations near Wallerscheid. Before we had the Jumbos, our advance procedure was to halt when we suspected 88s and call in artillery or air support, he later wrote in a report to headquarters. Now, we put the Jumbos in the lead, identify the 88 positions when they fire ineffectively against our frontal armor, and neutralize them directly. It's cut our operational delays by nearly 60%. For Sergeant Daniel Evans, a gunner in another Jumbo nicknamed Rhino, the psychological advantage was equally important. The first time we took a direct hit from an 88 and kept rolling, everything changed, he recalled in a post-war interview. We went from being afraid of every hedgerow and tree line to feeling like we finally had a fighting chance. The Germans had been playing with loaded dice since North Africa with those guns, and we finally had an answer. General Major Rudolf Christoph Baron von Gersdorf, Chief of Staff of the German 7th Army, noted the impact in his diary on December 20, 1944. Our anti-tank gunners report increasing difficulty engaging American armor. The psychological effect of ineffective fire is severely damaging morale. Units report that American tanks now advance directly toward 88mm positions without hesitation, a tactical shift that renders our defensive preparations increasingly ineffective. By late December 1944, as the Battle of the Bulge raged to the north, the 761st Tank Battalion, with its complement of jumbos, continued operations in the Hurtgen Forest area. On December 23rd, they encountered what would prove to be their most significant test yet. Hauptmann Wilhelm Bittrich, a decorated veteran of the Eastern Front, had established a defensive position near the village of Germeter with 3 88mm guns specifically positioned to counter the American heavy tanks he had been warned about. Rather than positioning for frontal engagements, Bittrich arranged his guns to fire from concealed positions at oblique angles, targeting the somewhat thinner side armor of the jumbos. As Lieutenant Randall's column approached Germeter, they detected no immediate signs of danger. The road appeared clear, the forest silent except for the rumble of their engines and the crunch of snow beneath their tracks. "I don't like this, sir," Collins said over the intercom. "Too quiet." "Agreed," Randall replied. "All tanks, maintain spacing and prepare for." His words were cut short by the distinctive crack of an 88mm gun. The shell streaked not toward Blockbuster in the lead, but toward the second jumbo in the column, striking it at the junction where the side armor met the thinner rear plate. "Tank 2 is hit," shouted Rodriguez, watching through his vision port as smoke began pouring from the second vehicle. "All tanks, evasive maneuvers," ordered Randall. "They're targeting our flanks." Inside the second jumbo, War Daddy, chaos erupted as the 88mm round penetrated the side armor. The tank commander, Lieutenant Frank Harrison, was killed instantly. The driver, Corporal Peter Johnson, managed to steer the damaged vehicle behind a small rise, providing some cover as the remaining crew evacuated. 2 more 88mm rounds struck the ground near Blockbuster as Randall directed his driver to position the tank's strongest armor toward the identified gun position. Collins, smoke rounds, lay down cover for War Daddy's crew. The jumbo's 75mm gun launched smoke shells that quickly obscured the area, providing cover for the evacuating crew members from the stricken tank. Through the thickening smoke, Randall spotted the muzzle flash of one of the 88mm guns. "Target identified, bearing 030, range 600 meters, he directed. Collins adjusted the gun and fired. The He round found its mark, silencing one of the German positions. The exchange continued for nearly 20 minutes, with the Germans firing from concealed positions and the American jumbos maneuvering to bring their frontal armor to bear while returning fire. When the smoke cleared, 2 of the 3 German guns had been neutralized, while the Americans had lost 1 jumbo and had another damaged but reparable. As Randall surveyed the battlefield from his commander's hatch, he noted how the Germans had adapted their tactics. "They're learning," he told Collins. "They've figured out not to target our frontal armor." "So what now?" asked Collins, sweat streaming down his face despite the December cold. "We adapt too," Randall replied. "New formation protocols. No tank exposes its side or rear to suspected gun positions. We advance in echelon, keeping our fronts toward the threat." That evening, Randall drafted a detailed report of the engagement, including recommendations for tactical adjustments. The report made its way up the chain of command, eventually reaching Colonel Colin Keating, the armor officer on General Courtney Hodges' 1st Army staff. Keating immediately recognized the significance of the engagement. "The Germans have adapted to the jumbo's frontal armor," he told his colleagues during a staff meeting. "We need to distribute this information to all armored units immediately." Within 48 hours, updated tactical guidelines were distributed to American armored units across the European theater. The new protocols emphasized the importance of protecting the jumbo's more vulnerable side and rear armor while maximizing the use of its nearly impenetrable frontal protection. Meanwhile, the German High Command was conducting its own analysis. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief in the West, received a comprehensive briefing on the changing dynamics of anti-tank warfare. The modified Sherman, which our troops have nicknamed Dick Panzer or Fat Tank, presents a significant challenge to our defensive strategy, explained General der Artillerie Walter Warlimont. Our 88mm guns remain effective only when engaging from optimal angles against side or rear armor. And how prevalent are these vehicles? Von Rundstedt asked. Intelligence estimates approximately 250 in theater, with more likely arriving, Warlimont replied. However, they appear to be concentrating them at critical points to lead advances. Von Rundstedt nodded grimly. So we face not only an armor protection problem, but a production disparity. Even if we develop countermeasures, the Americans can simply produce more of these vehicles than we can produce counters. The reality of the industrial mismatch between Germany and the United States had never been more apparent. While Germany produced a total of 1,347 Tiger I and 489 Tiger II tanks during the entire war, the United States manufactured over 49,234 Sherman tanks of all variants. The jumbo Sherman represented what American industry could accomplish when faced with a specific battlefield challenge: rapid adaptation and sufficient production to make a tactical difference. By January 1945, the psychological impact of the jumbo's performance against the 88mm gun had rippled across both sides of the conflict. American tank crews requested assignment to units equipped with the reinforced Shermans, while German anti-tank crews increasingly reported equipment malfunctions or ammunition shortages rather than directly engaging the heavy American tanks. Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Strauss, who commanded an 88mm gun near the Roer River, later wrote in his memoir, "When we first encountered American tanks in Normandy, we held them in low regard. Their Sherman was inferior to our Panthers and Tigers, and even our 75mm anti-tank guns could penetrate them reliably. The arrival of their reinforced variant changed everything. The certainty we once felt when an American tank appeared in our sights disappeared. Now we had to consider whether we faced a standard Sherman we could destroy, or one of their jumbos that might survive our best shot and return fire with deadly accuracy." On January 10, 1945, during operations east of the Roer River, Lieutenant Randall's blockbuster led an advance toward the town of Düren. Intelligence had reported at least 5 88mm guns defending the approach. As the column of tanks moved forward, they maintained their new echelon formation, presenting only their frontal armor to suspected enemy positions. True to intelligence reports, the Germans opened fire from concealed positions. 5 88mm rounds streaked toward the American formation. 3 missed entirely, 1 struck the ground in front of Blockbuster, and 1 hit the jumbo's frontal armor directly. Inside the tank, the crew barely reacted to the impact. "Direct hit, no damage," reported Rodriguez with almost casual confidence. "Target identified," Collins responded, already traversing the turret. Firing. The jumbo's 75mm gun dispatched an armor-piercing round, striking the German position and destroying the 88mm gun with a direct hit. As the American advance continued, the remaining German guns fired sporadically before their crews abandoned the positions. A German prisoner captured during the advance, Unteroffizier Franz Schultz of the 246th Volksgrenadier Division, provided valuable insight during his interrogation. "We were ordered to delay your advance for at least 12 hours, he told his American interrogators. But our anti-tank commander said it was pointless once he identified your lead tanks as the heavy Shermans. He ordered us to fire a single volley, then withdraw to the secondary positions. He said anything more would just waste ammunition and lives against tanks our 88s couldn't penetrate." This pattern repeated itself across the front as American forces pushed deeper into Germany. The once feared 88mm gun, while still lethal against most Allied armor, had lost its aura of invincibility when confronted with the jumbo Sherman's reinforced frontal armor. Colonel Harold Brighton of the 3rd Armored Division summarized the shift in a report to SHAF headquarters in February 1945. "The deployment of the M4A3E2 has fundamentally altered the tactical dynamics of armored warfare in this theater. German anti-tank units no longer hold the psychological advantage they maintained since the Desert Campaign. Our crews advance with confidence, and the enemy increasingly chooses to withdraw rather than engage. The value of this shift in battlefield psychology cannot be overstated. As the war in Europe entered its final months, the story of the jumbo Sherman versus the German 88mm gun became part of the lore that traveled among combat units. American tankers who had once approached every hedgerow and tree line with dread now moved with newfound confidence when jumbos led the way. For Lieutenant Thomas Randall and the crew of Blockbuster, their war continued through the Rhineland campaign and into the heart of Germany. By the time they reached the Elbe River in April 1945, their jumbo had survived direct hits from 14 88mm rounds without a single penetration of its frontal armor. The last significant engagement between jumbos and 88mm guns occurred on April 11, 1945, near the town of Magdeburg. A desperate German rearguard action had positioned 4 88mm guns to delay the American advance long enough for retreating units to cross the Elbe. As Randall's Blockbuster led the approach, the German guns opened fire simultaneously. 2 rounds struck the jumbo's frontal armor, causing the tank to rock back on its suspension but failing to penetrate. "These guys never learn," Collins remarked as he returned fire, his round landing among the German gun position and silencing it permanently. Within 20 minutes, all 4 German positions had been neutralized, and the American advance continued. A week later, as Blockbuster was undergoing maintenance, General George S. Patton himself visited the unit. The general ran his hand along the scarred but unpenetrated frontal armor of the jumbo. "How many hits has she taken?" he asked Randall. 17 from 88s, sir, plus numerous smaller caliber rounds," Randall replied proudly. "All to the frontal armor. Not one penetration." Patton nodded with satisfaction. "When I first saw the specs for these jumbos, I thought the additional armor would make them too slow to be effective. I'm pleased to have been proven wrong. Your tank and others like it have saved countless American lives." After Germany's surrender in May 1945, detailed technical analysis of the jumbo's performance was conducted. The official report concluded, the M4A3E2's enhanced armor protection, particularly the 139.7mm, 5.5 inches, frontal hull armor, effectively neutralized the threat posed by the German 8.8 cm Flak 36 anti-tank gun when engaged frontally at normal combat ranges. This protection fundamentally altered tactical dynamics and provided a significant psychological advantage to American armored forces during the critical final months of the European campaign. For the German 88mm gun crews who never knew they faced a tank with nearly 7 inches of frontal armor at its thickest points, the experience shattered their long-held belief in German technological superiority. As one captured German officer put it, "We always believed that American industrial capacity would produce quantity at the expense of quality. The appearance of tanks that our best weapons couldn't destroy forced us to reconsider this assumption." The jumbo Sherman's success against the dreaded 88mm gun illustrated a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Industrial capacity combined with practical engineering often prevails over technical perfection produced in limited quantities. While Germany's Tiger and Panther tanks remained individually superior to standard Shermans, the appearance of 254 jumbos had a disproportionate impact on battlefield psychology and tactics. After the war, Oberstleutnant Karl Mayer of the German General Staff wrote in his analysis, "The American M4A3E2 represented not merely a technical adaptation, but a psychological watershed in the European campaign. When our gunners realized their most potent weapon had been neutralized by American industrial efficiency, the myth of German invincibility that had sustained many units through difficult times was irreparably damaged." Today, only a handful of jumbo Shermans survive in museums around the world. Their external appearance gives little indication of the psychological revolution they sparked on the battlefield, a revolution that occurred one confused German 88mm gunner at a time, as they watched their previously devastating weapons bounce harmlessly off the front of what appeared to be just another American Sherman tank. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.